Okay, so I was asked if I could demonstrate how to do a hand axe, right? Not a tomahawk, but a hand axe with natural tools. Well, I'm going to do it how I thought they did it in the past, okay? And that was with Hammerstone. So I got some Hammerstones. I've already napped a little bit with these, so I know the grades. This is a soft grade Hammerstone, kind of crumbly. These are all quartzite, by the way. This one is soft, it crumbles. This one is medium. It does dimple, but it's not as soft as that one. And this one is hard. It does not dimple or crumble very much at all. But it's not really smooth. It still has a kind of a rough surface. So it'll catch the edge. Right? It won't be too slippery. Now there isn't flat spots developed on these yet, unless I use this side on this one. Okay? And this is developing a flat spot. The reason why I mention that is because flat spots are very useful. Okay, so this is going to be rock, beginning with just nodules, like a rock to point video, but I'll be making a hand axe. Now, as I was doing research, I noticed these were not very large. Hand axes are not very large. I'm looking for my scale. Yeah, I'm going to weigh this before I start. If it'll go up to that much. Let's see. Yeah, 1 pound, 8.7 ounces. Okay, 1.5 pounds. Right, is it? Feels heavier than that, but oh well. Yeah, okay. Alright, so hopefully I'll remember to weigh it after I finish. Okay, so I've got videos with the natural tools, but I don't think I have one that's specifically on hand axes. They weren't very large, I think I was saying that. And I think I found an average, or what I think is an average, which is about 10 centimeters or 4 inches for the finished piece. So you need something a little bit bigger. Alright, 10 centimeters is very close to 4 inches. You can see the 10 right there. It just so happens that a lot of them that I saw when I looked online were in that range, around 4 inches long. And now, if you look for the drawings of these hand axes from archaeological texts. They usually have a little scale. They're hand sketched, you know, black and white sketches, and you can see the differences and see the sizes. All right. So I'll start with the soft Hammerstone just to see what we got. And one thing about smaller nodules of flint is that they are of higher quality in many cases, higher quality than the big nodules. So I would start with a small nodule if I wanted to make one nowadays. Now, did they use them back in the day? Preferentially? Did they search for small nodules instead of big ones? I think so, yeah. I don't think the hand axes need to be very large to be functional. Now, another thing to keep in mind, I guess, is that humans, when they first started using these, were smaller than we are. Yeah, hominids, they're smaller than modern humans. Although I think modern humans also used hand axes. Well, I know that they did, but the hand axes changed a little bit over time. And the techniques for reducing stone changed a little bit over time. I don't know the exact techniques on how they did this, because I didn't do enough studying on these before I started this. I don't know what the flakes look like for the hand axes and how the debitage changed over time. If you get long flakes like this, that indicates, you know, advanced planning. If you get smaller flakes, mostly smaller flakes, it indicates just expedient knapping and not much advanced planning, in my opinion. Okay. Now I did the long flake there just because I have a lot of practice, and I tend to plan out certain flakes. They'll make it easier for me to finish what I'm doing. So that's why I got long flakes. But if I were to demonstrate this the way they did it back in the day, I would have to know what the debitage look like so I can imitate the debitage as well. Okay. So yeah, this is a pretty good grade chert. But anyway, I did get 3 different types of hammerstones. I think that's pretty common to get different grades of hammerstones, even back in the day where there wasn't very many. There wasn't very much history of flint knapping. I think that they would at least be intelligent enough to get a couple, you know, a few different grades of hammerstones. Well, maybe not. Maybe they just use one grade. Maybe they just use all soft hammerstones. I don't know. I really don't know. Anyway, I was going to say, one of the rules of thumb of flint knapping is to use a hammerstone sort of kind of the same weight as your workpiece, which is a good rule of thumb, but I tend to use a hammerstone that's slightly lighter, or maybe even a lot lighter than the workpiece. Let's see what I got. Right now I think they're about the same, although I think the workpiece is kind of heavier right now. Let's see. 14.4 ounces, and this is 11.1 ounce. Yeah. And as it gets smaller, you can change up the size of the hammerstone. You don't have to though, but it does work well to keep this hammerstone in proportion to the workpiece. And when you want to drive off big flakes, you want to use a larger hammerstone. There's less work involved in swinging it, although it'll make your wrist tired faster. So, I mean, if you just want a chopper, this is good enough, right? If you just want to chop whatever you're chopping. But the hand axes that I saw were fairly well developed. So I'll be doing those. One of those. It's pretty straightforward. Yeah. You can zigzag around the edges. Pretty much. That's all you do. Now this is crumbling way too fast, so I'm going to switch over to the medium grit or medium hardness hammerstone. See, this is where it's important to know what the debitage looks like, because I don't know if they took off flakes like this for these hand axes, or if they did, at what time period was that? If you want to replicate, like if you're doing a demonstration for a group of people, you want to replicate the debitage as well as the hand axe. But I said that already. Okay. Now, what about abrading the edges and stuff? How important is it? a very good question. It tends to be very important, yes. But I don't know how much of it was done in the past without examining the debitage. They may have just constructed these without much fuss and just went to town on these and didn't care too much about preparation of edges. Just made them very quickly. Could be that, or it could be that they did prepare the edges quite well. A lot of questions. And how adaptive were they? Was the tip determined in the very beginning, or did the tip end up being incidental? Like, I thought I was going to make this the tip at first, but then this side got real narrow, so I switched it. How many times did that happen in the past? That's one of the things that's hard to tell. Is that important? It is kind of important, because if it's haphazard and opportunistic rather than planned, it shows how well developed the brains were, or the culture around flint-knapping was. If it was highly developed around the culture of flint-knapping, then you would have planned out procedures. If it wasn't, you would have haphazard, just opportunistic flaking, in my opinion. Now, I'm a modern napper who uses opportunistic flaking. What about that? Well, I just don't want to think too much. Yeah. Well, let's see. Yeah, I don't want to think too much, so I'm very opportunistic. But if you can't think very much, if it's not possible, because your brains are not developed, or their brains are not developed, then you don't have much choice but to be opportunistic. I cut myself on that one. Let's see. So, how did I end up cutting myself? I think I hit the edge, just barely nicked the edge. Hold on. Did they have protection back in the day? I don't know. I don't think they did. Let me see. What did I do with the band-aids? Let me pause. Okay, we're back. Yeah, I could tell that was going to start gushing out. So yeah, I had to stop the leak. Now, that's one of the hazards of using a small hammerstone, of course, is you get really close to the workpiece. Anyway, let's see if I can finish this out. This is going to be smaller than a lot of the average, or it's not going to be. It's going to be a lot smaller than the average. Let's say, yeah, 3-something inches. Because I got to make an adjustment to the hammerstones. I'm removing a lot of the edge because I'm having to really hit hard to get this thin down. This is a low quality chert. It was higher quality near the cortex. Near the cortex was high, so high quality, so I was able to skim it. But as soon as I get toward the middle, it was not good. All right, let's move on to the next one. I don't know what the failure rate on these hand axes was, but it's not a total failure because you can use a lot of those flakes. Anyway, I'll get to that later. All right, let's see what we got. This one, maybe this one isn't so bad on the interior. Large, soft hammerstone. Medium grade chert. Now these, when I looked into these, they were using Rhyolite and other materials that are not so great to make these. So they had some skill, right? If they're going to make some of these out of Rhyolite and other very difficult stones, it requires some skill to get them flaked. Now they could be just using flakes and not reducing them down into bifaces. You know, they could be using the spalls and flakes as their hand axes. That requires a little bit less of a expertise. A little bit less expertise to just use spalls as your hand axe. This, what I'm doing here, requires a lot more practice. You know, reducing it down into a biface. Let's see. Yeah, as it gets more difficult to remove flakes, switch over to a harder hammerstone. That way you can apply force to a smaller area. See, this tends to apply force in a larger area, so you have to hit harder to get a flake to get the stone to break the surface tension to produce a flake. With a harder hammerstone, it concentrates the force a little bit more, and you're able to break the surface, or you're able to break the tensile strength. Did I say surface tension? Yeah, surface tension is different. The tensile strength is more easily broken with a harder hammerstone. Or I should say, more easily overcome. Yeah. So, yeah, we don't know the debitage on these. Or I didn't study what the debitage looked like on these hand axes. So, I don't know if they did that sort of strike to remove that sort of flake. And I don't know about the failure rates. I didn't weigh this before I started, did I? No. I did not. Oh well. I was gonna weigh it so that we could know how much is waste. Just to get kind of an idea. Now, can these get sharp just with hammerstones? Yes. These can get sharp just by using the hammerstone. I'll show you in a minute what I do, or how I knap a sharp edge with a hammerstone. You can already kind of see it. It's very similar to beveling. I tend to go in one direction if I want to sharpen or make sure it's sharp. If I'm using a hammerstone, I tend to knap in one direction. Now, if I just want this to cut, that's all I need is something to cut with. It's pretty much done. All right. If I want it to be safe to handle, I just knock down one side, grind down one side. Safe to handle. Now, some of this is not sharp, but some of it is. Again, I don't know what the edges are like on the real artifacts. Are there some areas that are dull and battered, or are they all sharp? Is most of the edge wear at the tip, or the edge wear on the side, or all over the place? I don't know these things. The technique for knapping with a hammerstone is just practice. There's no set technique because every stone is a little bit different. Every hammerstone is a little bit different. Every tool stone is a little bit different. If I tell you that most of the time they needed stout platforms, I'd be wrong because I don't know. I don't know what you need most of the time. If I tell you you need a hard hammerstone most of the time, it's not right because I don't know if you need a hard hammerstone most of the time. And things like that. There's no set technique as far as I can tell, other than creating a fairly straight edge. But I've seen in the pictures that these are wavy, and a lot of times there's a turtleback right in the middle. There tends to be a thinning of the ends with a turtleback in the middle. So I'm going to put in I'm going to try to make it thin near the tip here, because the tips or the ends seem to be thinner than the middle. So using a hammerstone just requires practice, and there's no set rule for what works with what angle works with what stone or anything like that. There's no set rule. You just gotta learn what works for you and for the materials. Sometimes they don't work well together. Sometimes a hammerstone just won't do the job of flaking it in a way that makes a sharp edge. Like right there. If I wanted a sharp edge right there with a hammerstone, I might have to use something harder. Let's try the harder one. Yeah. Okay. So basically it has these hand axes have a point on them, and a lot of times they still have Cortex on the other side. And I don't know if they were ground down very much. I have a feeling that they were either ground down some, or they left the Cortex on one side, or even on the face of it here. So it'd be more comfortable to hold. Okay. Now this will cut. Okay, it's a completed hand axe. It's thin enough. It's got a thin end here and fairly thin there, with a thicker spot in the middle. Okay, so let's see. I mean, it'll cut. Just so I don't make a mistake and say that it will cut it when it won't. Let's see. I gotta make sure I don't cut myself. Now leather is a little bit tougher than living skin or tissue, right? It will cut this. Okay. Now, you might be saying, well, that doesn't look like it will cut very well. You're actually right. There's a better way to cut the leather, and that's with the flakes. Okay? Easy peasy with this. can open a hide with the flake. So why would they make the hand axe? Very good question. And you might say, it's for chopping. You can't chop with this. Chopping with a thin down edge breaks the edge off. I'll tell you right now, you want to chop with something like this. With something actually that looks like this. This is what you want to chop with. Something much heftier than this. This is what you want to chop with. And if you want an edge that's good for chopping, you would develop this edge. Okay. If you want to chop, use a lot thicker of an edge. I would use this because I know that it works well. Okay, where's my piece of wood? No, I don't want to ruin my stuff. Yeah, I do want to ruin my stuff. Well, I think you get the idea. I don't have to sit here and demonstrate, but you get the idea. This is much better. If I wanted to chop, it's heftier too, than to use this for chopping. I think these were used mainly as knives and carried around as a tool, as a knife, which is not that great, as you can see. 3 attempts to cut through the leather weren't as good as one attempt with the flake. So why would you want to use the hand axe to cut and not the flake? I think, and this is my opinion, that these were used as weapons, not necessarily as butchering tools, although you can use them as butchering tools. Okay, not for chopping, because there's what we already know that these are better for chopping. Not for cutting into hides, because we know that these are better. There's a lot of these in here that are much better for cutting into hides with almost no effort. Now, that was a dull spot anyway. It's almost no effort. I had to really dig in, and it still, after 3 attempts, didn't go all the way through. But one attempt just opens it up. So it's not for opening up hides, but as a weapon, it's much better than this. As a weapon, because this is able to actually stand up to abuse when fighting. All right, but that's just my opinion. Okay, I know that's going to be a controversial topic, but I think you can carry these around as weapons, and they won't break, or they won't tend to. If you carry these around, like normally if you were cutting up hides, you would carry a bunch of these around in a little sack or something, right? And you just pick one, but the edges tend to get dull after a while carrying these around. So you carry one of these around. Maybe you can do some expedient butchering in the field, but it's not that great. But it is pretty good as a weapon. And the bigger they get, the better they are. They become what they call skull crushers. Yeah, if you got a big one like this. Now, I've seen some hand axes that are 6 inches. Right? What did they say? 20 centimeters. No. What was I looking at the other day? And this morning. I know 10 centimeters is in range. I don't think 20 is. I'm getting mixed up between some other stuff. But this size here is also the size of a hand axe. So both of these are within range. This is probably on the larger size, and this is probably on the smaller side of the sizes. Okay, now a large one like this is cumbersome to use as a weapon because you can easily drop it. It could slip out of your hand, especially if you're sweaty. But this one is easy to keep in your hand. Easy. And you can do a lot more damage than a punch or something. You can slice open. Yeah, slice open the skin easily. So that's my opinion. I can try doing another one, I suppose. But anyway, my opinion is these are weapons and not camp tools. Now there's use wear on these, where it looks like they've got abrasions that are caused by wood and plant matter, or maybe hides. This could be used for hide processing, but hide processing you have to have a much finer edge than this. If you look on the drawings for hand axes, the edges are all wavy and wonky. They're not refined. You can get much better hide processing properties from a flake. Just look through the flakes and find one that's rounded like this with a fine edge, and you can process hides with a flake. What I mean by process, you scrape the flesh from the inside and the hair from the outside. Okay, it's much better than this wonky edge. So yeah, let's see. Let me see if I can make a bigger one. Now that I got some practice. Let's see if this will cooperate. Without breaking my hammerstone. So you can use that to open a hide up. It's just a flake. You don't need a specialized looking thing. But to fight with this, you might drop it, or you might hit something like your opponent's club or spear and break it. It's a little bit too delicate, but it's perfect for hide opening and for hide processing. So you make something a little more hefty. Yep. Okay. Soft hammerstones are fun and all, but it gets a little aggravating. So yeah, this will work as a chopper, but it's way too thick for a hand axe. If you look at the pictures, the hand axes are not this thick. This is perfect for a chopper if you want to chop something. So I don't think hand axes were choppers at all. No. I don't think they were choppers at all. I think there were specialized tools for fighting, and the reason why they had cortex on one side or something that was dull on one side is because it reduces your chance of injury. If you hit an opponent and let's say you hit his skull, you don't want to drive this thing into your hand hitting something hard. And yeah, developing a specialized skill and practicing for hours and hours to actually thin these things down from nodules requires some sort of motivation. What would motivate someone to spend that much time doing it when all he needs is this? All he needs is that. Why would he spend so much time trying to develop this specialized tool that requires a lot of practice to get thinned down? It's because it's a weapon. That can help you survive in self-defense or in offense, whatever the case may be. Not everyone was a nice guy back in the day. So these could be offensive weapons. You want to move into a new territory, and you'll be fighting the people that live there. Make a bunch of these. Bring them with you. Yep. And who knows? You know, after the battle, you go around and collect trophies. What do I mean by that? Well, you're going to have to use your imagination on that one. If you wonder why some of these might have indicators of being used to process skin and bones, it may be because they were used to decapitate. I know it's an ugly subject to think about. But it's a very good possibility, in my opinion. All right. Yeah. So this type of skill that you need to thin these things down requires a lot of motivation to stick with. And there's really not that much motivation involved if you already have other tools that can do the job. A lot of these other things can do the job that archaeologists have said that these tools are for. There are other tools that are better suited for the jobs than this particular thing. And you can, even with my amount of experience, I got over 10 years of knapping, I'm still finding it difficult to thin this down and sharpen it. So it takes years and possibly several years to learn how to do this. So you're imitating the hand axes of the past. So I got about the same size result. Now, would I fight with them this size? No, I wouldn't. I would have something bigger for sure. But this is a lot better than a thin flake. But it's not better for chopping wood than something like this. Now, can I use this for fighting too? Yeah. It's just heavy. It's much lighter. I can carry this around, not a problem. You might say, well, why would you carry something heavy around for chopping wood? Well, you might just leave this behind in the camp. You know, you don't always have to carry those. But this you can carry it around all the time. 24/7. You can carry one of these around. Yep. And it's not gonna be rattling around like your flakes in a pouch. You want to be silent, you just carry these. Yep. Some of these edges are sharp. To sharpen it well, it takes practice also, but you just hit downward and from one side only, and that sharpens it sufficiently to create an edge that'll do the job. Might not be as good as a flake, but it does the job, especially on living tissue. Yep. Well, you might say, well, okay, well, living tissue, that's what you're butchering anyway, so, you know, it can be used for butchering, right? Yeah. I still would use a flake on butchering, though, because I could take my time. I could sit there and take my time and butcher that stuff with a thin flake. And I can create such nice slices of meat with this. At this thing I'd be, you know, not so happy with. Know what I mean? But if I needed to fight with it, yeah, I'd much rather have this. It's kind of hefty than this. All right. So yeah, I don't have big nodules to do this with, and I don't want to waste my good Georgia flint to demonstrate this. So I think you get the idea. Okay? The higher the quality of the stone, the easier it is to put in an edge. But yeah, they're thinned down to a good extent. They may have been hafted. You know, you can put this into a piece of wood and use it as part of a club. Again, it's I would tend to use it as a weapon. You know, big. You know, they were using clubs and spears and sticks. Well, you can make it more lethal by cutting a notch in the club and sticking it in the notch, and maybe forcing it in to a slot in your club or your stick, and eventually they evolved into the, you know, Celts that we see later on in later periods. But they may have started just with like this, and who knows what the fighting end was? Was it the pointy end or the dull end, or both? I don't know. Lots of questions. I hope that answers a little bit. And you saw how I managed to break into the nodules and thin them down. It does take practice to thin these down with a hammerstone. There are guys and modern knappers that know how to thin these way down with hammerstones. But when I saw the pictures of these, they were thick. So they didn't have advanced knapping techniques like we do now. Either because they didn't want to, because they could get these. Why would they want to thin them down when they can do these? They can just get a bunch of these. They didn't want to, or they just didn't have the brain capacity. I don't know. We don't know. All right, so there you go. Hope that helps. Probably raises more questions than it answers, but I tried. Alrighty.